actually was at the championship game down in Atlanta. And
Really?
My voice is just coming back.
Now, how do you handle that UK Louisville thing there? Because I'm sure in your church you're divided.
Yeah, we're about 40% Kentucky Wildcats and about 60% Louisville Cardinals, and
you're going
I'm
to keep
pretty much
you're going
a
to keep it
diehard
that way.
Louisville Cardinal.
And you're going to keep it 60-40, right? So you can.
Yeah, I'm very careful.
Yeah.
I was saying somebody was saying, are you going to get up and wear a red shirt when you preach and rub it in everybody's face? And I said, well, I got to be a little bit more politically correct than that, but everybody knows where I stand, and we'll have some fun with it. That's for certain.
I got you. Talking to Pastor Dave Stone from Louisville, Kentucky. The book you've written is How to Raise Selfless Kids in a Self-Centered World. When I read this title and I thought about this topic, I went, good luck with that one. How to Raise Selfless Kids in a Self-Centered World. What brought on this idea to write on this?
Well, probably what you just said is the fact that everybody sees kids, and it is all about me. It's all about them. And we have a number of homes that are child-centered as opposed to Christ-centered. The attention is on self as opposed to on others. And yet the principle that we find all throughout the New Testament, modeled by Jesus, talked about throughout all of the New Testament, is to honor others above yourself. And so I got to thinking, what if we really looked at this from a biblical worldview, and we tried to raise our kids in such a way that they actually put the focus and attention on others first before they thought of themselves. And I do think it's possible. Now, the problem is that our kids, they look to us, and they're going to follow however we model and whatever we flesh out for them. And so the challenge really is for each of us as parents to make certain that we're being others-oriented and that we're honoring others before we think of ourselves.
Pastor Stone, one of the things you mentioned, the title is How to Raise Selfless Kids in a Self-Centered World. But in some ways, America seems, and I'm not an America basher, I'm a big fan of our country, but in some ways, our country does promote individualism almost to the extent that it's telling you that your dreams are the most important thing you can work on. You can be anything you want to be. You can become president. You can become a surgeon. And your picture, the illustration on the front cover, I think is very well chosen. It is a rainbow-colored lollipop on a stick. And I think we think of that as being, obviously empty calories, sweet. It's something for me. So
exactly.
does living in America, does that add a layer of challenge for parents where the consumer, for example, reigns supreme and the individual is lifted up even above the community?
Yeah, our society obviously loves rags to riches. And Christianity flies right in the face of that because it's a riches to rags story. Here's the God of heaven leaving heaven to come down, and the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. So it's just the opposite. And there's no question that everywhere we turn in society, they tout the stories of the people who have the possessions, and yet when you look beneath the surface, there's a lot of times where those people, there's an emptiness that's there, and it's because they find their joy through their possessions or through a position, and they are going to toot their own horn, but the problem is they've climbed this ladder of success, but they get to the top and they realize that the ladder is leading to nowhere. I like to give the analogy of our culture by just saying, look at the different periodicals and popular magazines of the past 60 years. It used to be Time, and then it became Life, and then it was replaced with People magazine, and then it went to Us, and then it went to Self, and now there's a magazine out called Me. And that is a perfect picture of the regression in our overwhelming desire to be noticed. And social media even screams it itself that it's all about me. So the more I think we can raise our kids to have that focus on Christ and to take the spotlight off of themselves and put it on others, actually the more fulfillment they're going to experience.
Talking to Pastor Dave Stone. The book is called How to Raise Selfless Kids in a Self-Centered World. And it's available in bookstores everywhere?
It is. It just came out a couple of days ago. It's on Amazon as well, but it's in bookstores and Thomas Nelson's website. You can get it about anywhere.
And this is part of a series, right?
It is. It's the third book of the Faithful Families series, and I have this passion where I believe the most practical way to spread the gospel is through moms and dads who model a genuine faith for their children. I like what Albert Schweitzer said. He said, example is not the best way of teaching. He said, it is the only way of teaching. And so when parents set that godly example, and they are selfless, they are generous, they are reaching out to the underdog, then it becomes a more natural step for their kids to follow in their footsteps. And it actually can become the first step that they have in their minds is, hey, what could we do for those people? Or could we do something special to reach out and invite this neighbor to come over because he doesn't have much of a family, and I'd love for him to join us for dinner some night.
You know, talking to Pastor Dave Stone, by the way, we always, first of all, encourage you to patronize your local Christian bookstore. But
right.
there are obviously
Yes.
other ways that everybody knows about to purchase books, but those guys need your support.
They do.
I'm going to talk about the idea, that today, in today's world, here in the U.S. at least, maybe that the relationship between parents and children is different than it was, say, 30, 40, 50 years ago in this country, where the parents were, it was the Leave It to Beaver or, that sort of era where the parents were the authoritative, teachers of morality and right. Andy Griffith, and Opie and those kinds of things.
Ozzie and Harriet.
Where something happened in the 70s and 80s and 90s and even today, where the presentation of the relationship between the parent and the children is oftentimes peers, or they, or even in some cases, the parents are the buffoons, especially the dad.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm talking about in television shows, but still. So, but I know a lot of, we've seen it the last 20 years where parents are relating to children as their friends rather than, and I'm not saying you can't be friends with your children, but instead of being the parental authority in their lives. Has that been a part of the problem that's led to this self-centered world that a lot of children have today?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, because there are a lot of parents that skip through the stages of parenting, and they want to be loved and they want to be liked by their kids. And their job is not to be a peer. Their job right now is to be a parent. And I always like to remind parents that if you don't go through some of these different stages of parenting, you will be relegated or forced to relive that stage. It's kind of like if you hit a triple and you're rounding second and heading to third, and you accidentally miss second base, well, you can't go on to third. You've got to stop, go back, touch second before you go to third. And the stages, as I see them, are discipline, being that primary stage in the early years, followed by teaching. And after that, there is this coaching where you're more on the sidelines, encouraging them in some things that they need to be doing. And then eventually, when they're 18, 19, 20 years of age, then you move into the friendship stage. And it is a very sweet stage if you have covered the others well. And sure, we have to regroup, and based on each of our children, some of them will do better in some stages than others, but some will take more training than others at certain times. But once you've covered those main building blocks of discipline and teaching them godly principles and coaching them and giving them an opportunity to fail or to succeed, that's when you will move into the friendship stage. Just don't do it early.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, let me ask you this. You mentioned, and Tim was talking about it, how parents in over the last 20 or 30 years have seemed to want to skip those stages and want to be liked by their kids and want to be friends. What brought that about? I mean, there has to have been some cultural shift to make grown people be so concerned with whether their kids like them or accept them as friends. You see what I'm saying? I mean, there's got to be, because my parents weren't. My parents weren't that way.
There were several triggers that I think there's been several triggers. One is that we have more broken homes, and as a result of that, we have divorced couples who are warring with each other. They might have joint custody, and so now they're in a situation where, with the divorce rate being over 50%, with the second marriage divorce rate being over 60%, you now have a mom in one home, a dad in another house, and the child goes back and forth between the two, and no one wants to be the heavy. Yeah. And they don't want to be the authority figure. Instead, they want to be liked, and it becomes a tug of war through that child. So I think there's no question that we have to realistically acknowledge that has somehow exacerbated the situation when it comes to, are you going to be a people pleaser with your kids? The fact that God has given us as parents an important responsibility to raise these kids, we can't shirk that responsibility. David says in the Psalms, I think it's Psalm 127, verses 4 and 5, he says, children are like arrows. Blessed is the one who has a quiver full of them. And so we realize children are a blessing, but when David makes the analogy that they're like an arrow, that tells me several things. I need to straighten that arrow. I need to sharpen it. I need to aim it in the right direction, and I need to release it for it to really fulfill its purpose. And there are a lot of parents that are shortcutting the concept of sharpening or straightening or aiming their child, and to add to the problem, they don't want to release them, and so they hold on to them. And that's the biblical picture, is a man will leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the two will become one flesh. But it starts with preparing them to leave, raising them to be released, and then to let go of that arrow so that they can leave their father and mother and can be joined into another family.
We're talking to Pastor Dave Stone. He is from Louisville, Kentucky. His book is called How to Raise Selfless Kids in a Self-Centered World, and it's available at Christian bookstores everywhere or online at the usual places. It's published by Thomas Nelson, and it's part of a series. Is that what you said?
Yes, it's part of the Faithful Families series, and we're just trying to encourage parents, and so many parents just feel guilt-ridden, and they think it's too late with their own family, and that's just not the case. I anytime I can look a parent in the eye, I just want them to know, you can do this. You really can. You might say, oh, I come from a dysfunctional family. We've never raised kids to love the Lord, or we've been more selfish. You know what? That's okay. God is much more concerned with your direction than he is your perfection. And the purpose of these books is to let parents know you can do this. With God's help, you can do it. Not on your own, but when you rely on him, he can make the difference.
Talk